We are here to talk about abundance, something many people desire, but few actually achieve. In other words, having an abundance mindset is rare and only some people manage to develop it. When we talk about abundance, we can see it as a tripod. It's the combination of well-being, money, and loved ones. If you have money, you might think that's all you need. But imagine this example: you have a lot of money, but you're in the final stages of an illness. You would probably give up your entire fortune to be cured, right? Wealth is meaningless without good health. Now, what if you have money and health, but no one to share it with? In that case, life would still feel incomplete. True abundance is a blend of well-being, money, and loved ones. That is real prosperity. Now let's do an exercise. Write in the comments: prosperity is money, well-being, and loved ones. Now, let's talk about money. What is financial success? Financial success means you never have to stop buying something you want or doing something you enjoy due to a lack of money. If you do things you don't want just for money, or stop doing what you love because of a lack of it, you haven't yet reached this level of success and financial independence. There are 4 financial levels. The first is the survival level, where you barely make ends meet. You spend everything you earn, and sometimes even more, accumulating debt. This level is tough, right? It means spending more than you make. The second level I call trading 6 for half a dozen. You spend exactly what you earn, with nothing left over. The third level is the under the mattress level. You earn more than you spend, but you don't know how to make that extra money work for you. So you actually lose money due to inflation. Finally, the fourth level is earning, spending less than you earn, and making the extra money work for you every month, thereby achieving financial freedom, something only 5% of people in the world have. Here, we'll talk about how to develop an abundance mindset so that money works for you, instead of you living just to earn money. A prosperity mindset allows you to live well, with or without money. It's easier to live with money, but there are people who live very well without having great fortunes. That's not the path we're choosing here. We're choosing the path of abundance, where you learn to create prosperity. To learn how to generate wealth, it's necessary to understand how the abundance cycle works. The prosperity in your life depends on how fast this wheel of abundance spins. You might wonder why the abundance cycle isn't spinning faster in your life. It may not be moving due to emotional blockages. Maybe you think money is bad, or that rich people can't be good, that it's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich person to enter heaven. Another reason could be that you don't know the laws of wealth: earning, spending, saving, and investing. These laws are universal. They work anywhere and should be taught from a young age. Most people are born and grow up without learning this, and that's why we're talking about it today. Because we want a different approach to life, right? Financial literacy is also key. It's essential to learn how to manage numbers. There's a common trend known as number phobia, which many people develop in childhood, causing them to dislike dealing with calculations. If you're not comfortable with numbers, it will be difficult for you to accumulate wealth. Because being rich requires learning how to manage your finances. So, what will we do here? First, I'll show you how to overcome these emotional blockages. Imagine this situation. You're 6 years old, having dinner with your parents, and your dad, sitting at the head of the table, says, "I'd rather you be poor and honest than rich and dishonest." It's better to be poor and honest because dishonest rich people won't enter heaven. At 6 years old, you can't question your dad and tell him that there are both honest poor people and honest rich people. At that age, you simply listen and assume what he says is true, and that becomes part of your mindset. Over time, this idea becomes a truth for you. Years will pass, and maybe 20 or 30 years later, you start earning a lot of money, but then, you might begin to sabotage yourself. Nobody wants to be seen as dishonest, so if you believe that having money makes you a bad person, you'll find ways to get rid of that money just to keep feeling honest. Some people carry this belief their entire lives. The ideas we adopt tend to stay with us forever. Once they are in our minds, they get reinforced through repetition. By repeating a belief, you end up creating what you believe in, which further strengthens that idea. Some people spend their whole lives trapped in this cycle. That's why it's so important to understand the wheel of abundance and how it can come to a stop, as if it had a handbrake, due to your own emotional blocks. Imagine that, at 6 years old, you're in a special place, dressed in your best clothes, and someone well-dressed, holding a microphone, says it's easier for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter heaven. You go home with that message engraved in your mind. When you arrive, you turn on the TV and see a huge camel. Then you open a drawer and find a tiny needle. Based on that, you conclude that it's impossible for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle, and you decide you'd rather be poor if that's what it takes to get into heaven. Over time, you'll forget the details. Just like that preacher failed to explain that, years ago, the walls of Jerusalem had gates that closed at 6 in the evening. Any caravan or camel arriving after the tower couldn't pass through the main gates. The only entrance was a small door called the Eye of the Needle, where camels had to kneel and be unloaded in order to pass through. The teaching here is that to enter the kingdom of heaven, you must enter with humility and without material attachments. You don't take your possessions to heaven. Your coffin won't have drawers to store belongings. Everything you have in this life is not truly yours. You're only a temporary steward. In the end, when you go, you'll only take your experiences with you, not your things. But that doesn't mean owning material goods keeps you out of the kingdom of heaven. Money is just a tool that, when used wisely, can even strengthen your spirituality. For example, a rope is just a rope. It can be used to hurt someone or to rescue someone from drowning. The rope itself isn't good or bad. A knife is just a knife. It can be used to spread butter or to harm. So, the knife itself isn't good or bad either. Money follows the same logic. It's a tool that, when used properly, can be a path towards spiritual growth. That's why it's essential to understand that there is nothing wrong with earning money. You just need to know how to use it well, without greed or selfishness. Also, remember, you won't take anything with you. Make money work for you, and at the same time, help it contribute to the well-being of others. Let's dive deeper into the structure of the wheel of abundance, which has two components, giving and receiving. You can't make a wheel turn using only one half. Some people have trouble giving, they're very stingy, and that's not an attitude they support. Others have trouble receiving. Their pride gets in the way. We shouldn't be like those who struggle with both giving and receiving. If you want to increase your prosperity and make the wheel of abundance spin faster in your life, you need to learn to balance both giving and receiving. An example of this is the gardener who prunes plants so they can grow better. Notice something interesting. By pruning, you're helping the plants thrive. In the same way, when you give, it's like pruning the tree of prosperity. Pruning the tree of prosperity can be seen as an act of service that takes the form of solidarity or generosity. When you help someone in need, you're being supportive. Solidarity. When you give to someone who doesn't need it, you're being generous. For example, if you give a birthday gift to a friend who can afford it themselves, that's generosity, not solidarity. Ideally, you should practice both qualities. It's important to exercise both solidarity and generosity. If you only practice solidarity, you're sending this message to your subconscious. Only those in need receive. So, if I want to receive something, I must be in need. But if you also practice generosity by helping those who are in need, you're sending the message that it's possible to receive even without lacking anything. That's why I recommend practicing both solidarity and generosity. Pay attention. There are 4 key actions that help the wheel of abundance work in your life. Affirm, ask, take risks, and give thanks. The verb affirm highlights the importance of feeling worthy and acting accordingly. Before thinking about what your life would be like if you had a lot of money, ask yourself if you actually know how to manage it. Here's a surprising fact. More than 90% of lottery winners end up in a worse financial situation 10 years later. This is because they didn't have the right mindset before winning, and they ended up spending everything. By the time they realized it, everything was gone, and even more than they had. Remember, we are beings of language, and we create our reality with the affirmations we make. In the legal world, for example, an affirmation can change reality. A couple, by saying "I do" at their wedding, becomes married, and only by declaring a divorce can they officially separate. You are like the judge of your own life, and you have the power to make declarations about yourself. If you affirm that you are prosperous, you start acting like a prosperous person, and that brings you closer and closer to prosperity. So don't underestimate the power of affirming, and make declarations in the areas of your life where you feel it's necessary. It's also essential to apply the second verb, ask. Asking creates opportunities, and many people who don't ask run into problems because they don't know how to express what they need. As the saying goes, he who doesn't ask, doesn't get. If you don't ask, the universe doesn't know what you want. It's important to ask God and the universe for what you desire. The third point is learning to take risks. Without taking risks, it's difficult to achieve prosperity or wealth. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, a Swiss psychologist who lived in the U.S., devoted part of her life to helping people face death. In one of her 10-day courses, she offered a learning experience on how to prepare for the moment of dying. On this final day of the course, she gave a test to see if participants were truly ready to face the topic. Everyone gave a similar answer to one specific question. If you had the chance to live your life over again, would you take more risks? Almost all the participants said yes. This answer shows the importance of taking calculated risks in life. When you're 90 or 95 years old and someone asks what you would do differently if you could live again, you'd probably say the same thing. Understand that taking more risks doesn't mean being reckless. It means taking conscious, intentional risks. A good example is the trapeze artist in the circus. They face a decisive moment when letting go of one trapeze to grab the next. First, they make sure the other trapeze is ready. In that brief moment, as they pass from one to the other, they are in a state of vulnerability. Many people spend their entire lives avoiding that feeling of vulnerability, constantly seeking a sense of security that, in reality, does not exist. Life is full of opportunities, not guarantees, and that's why you need to apply the principle of taking risks more often in your life. It's also essential to practice gratitude, since gratitude is the foundation of all virtues. Many people spend their time complaining about what they've lost or what they wish they had, and it's rare to find someone who truly appreciates what they already have. The practice of gratitude is essential. You must learn to value what you have in order to attract more of what you want. Gratitude acts as a positive response within life system, so it's important to practice giving thanks regularly. By working with the verbs affirm, ask, take risks, and give thanks, you can accelerate the movement of your wheel of abundance. These verbs are powerful tools for creating reality and attracting greater prosperity into your life. Here, we are exploring the scientific, philosophical, and psychological aspects of prosperity. Science studies the causes and effects of natural phenomena. Philosophy analyzes thought, and psychology focuses on how those thoughts influence our behavior. We are addressing these topics to better understand the path to prosperity. Another key aspect is our mind, which has two parts: the thinker and the verifier. The thinker generates thoughts, and the verifier confirms them. The thinker's job is purely to think, while the verifier ensures those thoughts become real. For example, if you think making money is hard, it will be, and if you think it's easy, that will also be true. The phrase "whether you think you can or think you can't, you're right" expresses a great truth. The verifier will make the thinker's thoughts show up in your life, even in your financial situation. Here lies the real secret of prosperity: the ability to be in the moment. Imagine, for instance, it's Friday night and you've just come home from work. You turn on the TV and see the lottery results. You remember that you bought a ticket. You compare the numbers, and you realize you've won $1 million. Even though you can't claim the prize until Monday, you'll spend the weekend happy and worry-free. Even though all you have is a piece of paper in your pocket, you already feel like a millionaire. It's still just a ticket, but you're joyful because you know it will become $1 million on Monday. If you could maintain that level of certainty for everything you desire in the future, those desires would become reality. However, it's hard to sustain that certainty, isn't it? Sometimes you feel excited when you reach a goal, but that emotion doesn't last long. Do you know what the true secret of prosperity is? The ability to be in the moment. What do you desire? Let's say you want $1 million. How would you feel if you already had it? You'd probably say, I'd feel really happy. Then start feeling that way all the time, and that feeling will begin to manifest in your life. However, it's difficult to stay in that state because of the way you think, and that's exactly why you're reflecting on this. Always remember this model. The thinker generates thoughts, and the verifier confirms them. Together they form what we call the mind. The mind is not the same as the brain. It's found throughout the entire body. If you ask where the mind is, most people would point to their head, but in reality, it's in every part of the body, even in your big toe. If you get injured, your body heals itself. That healing ability is the intelligence of your organs, liver, kidneys, spleen, and so on. This is the body-mind, which is connected to a higher intelligence. Through this connection, it's possible to bring things from a higher level into this one by using the mind. That's why you need to learn how to create. Creating something from nothing is possible. Everything came from nothing at some point. Chairs, for example, didn't always exist. People used to sit on the ground until someone invented the chair out of nothing. This creative process is based on 3 principles: the principle of self-diagnosis, the principle of influence, and the principle of purpose. The principle of self-diagnosis involves asking yourself, what thoughts have I had that have shaped my life into what it is today? Think about your beliefs around money. Look at your bank account, and there you'll find the answer. What you believe about money is reflected in your finances. When you change the quality of your thoughts, the amount of money in your life also changes. Secondly, there are influences. You've received many negative ideas from your parents who, though well-intentioned, may have passed down some mistaken beliefs. For example, to become a doctor you must study medicine. To be a lawyer you must study law. But to become a parent, what do you need? You only need to have children. No one takes courses to be a good mother or father. That's why parents can make mistakes while raising their children, passing on negative thoughts and behaviors. Before the age of 5, children hear thousands of no's for every compliment they receive. A small child hears many more corrections than praise, and this has a significant impact on the mind. In this way, we accumulate many negative beliefs about money. To change this, you need to turn those negative influences into positive affirmations. Say them to yourself. Write them down. Record your voice saying them. Do this until your perspective changes. It's important to understand the difference between purposes and goals. If I'm in New York and I want to get to Chicago, I head toward Chicago. That's a specific goal. However, if my purpose is to go west, once I arrive in Chicago, I can keep going west. Even if I get to Los Angeles or Sydney, Australia, there's still more west. Because the earth is round, eventually, I'll end up back in New York. When you travel west and decide to go to Chicago, that's a goal. Having a goal is different from having a meaningful purpose in life. What is your mission in this life? This is an important question you should ask yourself for 21 consecutive nights before going to sleep. What is my mission in this life? Once you find your purpose, you'll notice many positive changes. You'll feel more energy and enthusiasm. Monday becomes your favorite day of the week, and financial problems fade away from your reality. Ask yourself, what is my mission in this life? When you discover your purpose and align your goals with it, your entire life changes. Understanding this difference between goals and purpose makes a huge difference in how you live. Now I want to talk about the laws of prosperity, principles that should be taught from childhood. These laws are like gravity. They work anywhere in the world when applied. These laws include the law of earning, the law of spending, the law of saving, and the law of investing. They are universal. So let's start with the law of earning. All money comes from the human mind. In fact, I often say that financial problems are not solved with money, and those hearing this for the first time might think it it sounds strange. How is it possible that financial problems can't be solved with money? Exactly. Financial problems are solved with creativity. Imagine you have to pay the rent, but you don't have enough money. So, you borrow from a friend, but then you do nothing to improve your situation throughout the month. The next month, rent is due again, and now you owe rent and the loan to your friend, who also expects to be repaid. That's not how to solve the problem. Or imagine you have a business that's struggling and you need capital. You go to the bank and take out a loan, but you don't make any changes in your business. The following month, your situation is still the same, and now you owe the loan plus interest. Again, there's no solution. Or think of a country with financial problems that borrows from the International Monetary Fund without making adjustments. That doesn't solve anything either. Interestingly, every time a country borrows from the IMF, it becomes more vulnerable to control by other nations. This is a kind of economic colonization, not with ships attacking our shores, but through a different form of domination. Financial problems are solved with creativity. Everything you see in the physical world, look around and pick something you desire. It could be the object you're holding, like your phone. That object was first formed in someone's mind. It is created in the mind before it appears in the real world. Creation happens twice, first in the mind and then in the tangible world. Wealth follows the same principle. Do you think you can just walk down the street one day and wealth will fall on you out of nowhere? No, that will never happen. First, you must imagine that wealth, and then it will manifest in the physical world. That is the law of income generation. The second law is the law of spending. The value of money is determined by what the buyer and the seller agree upon in each transaction. It's important to understand that if you're scrolling through social media on a Sunday morning and see an ad for a car you'd like to buy but it seems expensive, go see it. The seller might be willing to lower the price. Call them. Ask for a discount. You never know what could happen. Imagine you're sailing on a very dangerous river and suddenly your boat sinks. You have a backpack with $10,000, all dry and protected. You come across someone who's lived in the countryside all their life and has never had any contact with money. This person has a canoe, and you want them to take you 10 kilometers downstream. You offer them $10,000. That person has never seen money in their life, much less dollars. Do you think they'll accept? Of course not. Now, if you were in Miami and offered $10,000, that person would take you 100 kilometers upstream. The value of money is established by the buyer and the seller in every transaction. Those who become wealthy are not necessarily the ones who earn the most, but those who know how to spend. If you earn $20,000 a month and spend $19,000, you'll have $1,000 left at the end of the month. But if you earn $100,000 a year and spend $10,000 at the end of each month, you'll end up owing $10,000. Curiously, society tends to applaud those who earn a lot and spend everything, rather than those who earn less but manage to save by the end of the month, which makes the situation even more complicated. You have to learn how to manage your expenses, and we'll talk more about that later. The third law is the law of saving. Do you know how to save? First, establish what I call a personal tithe. You must set aside 10% of what you earn and save it. Do it for yourself. But at the end of the month, you know what happens. You pay everyone except the most important person, you. You pay the dentist, the car payment, the university, the kids' stuff, but you don't pay yourself. That has to change. You must make a personal tithe. You might say you can't tithe because you already earn too little, but if you earn little, 10% will also be little. It won't make a big difference. There are people who live with much less than you earn, so you can easily live on 90% of your income once you start saving that 10%. Magic happens in your life because you send a message to your subconscious. I live in abundance. I have enough, and I even have extra. Your subconscious begins to operate in an environment of prosperity, and that's very important. If you think, but I already saved 40%, great. But make sure to separate 30% from the 10%. That's fine, because that 10% will create a money magnet. The word tithe appears in all the world's religions and means 10%. So, save that 10% as your personal tithe. This money should not be used for anything that gets consumed or lost, like material goods. You must keep it until a certain moment and then use it to buy property or make investments. But you can't spend it on things that don't last because that 10% creates the money magnet. Notice this interesting thing. If you dig a spring at your house, water flows. Where does the water go? To the river. The river flows to the sea. So where does the water go? Water goes where there is already more water. Love goes to those who have love. Hatred is felt for those who have hatred. And so, where does money go? Money goes to those who already have money. It doesn't go to those living in poverty. It flows to those who have resources. If you go to the bank and tell the manager, "I'm in debt, lend me money," he'll say no, no, and no. But if you show up and prove that you don't need the money, he'll want to offer you a loan, because the bank makes money from interest. It's curious how credit works. Those who need it the most don't have it, while those who don't need it actually do. So, money attracts more money. When you start doing your personal tithe, you begin attracting more money. That's why the tithe is so important. Now let's talk about the law of investment. Investing is essential. Most people don't know how to do it. Investing means making your money work for you instead of you working for money. Investments must be legal. You're not going to invest in something illegal, right? You need to make sure you're putting your money into something legitimate. Once legality is ensured, you can evaluate whether an investment is more or less profitable, safe, or liquid. Profitability, security, and liquidity are the three key things to consider when investing. There is money you'll leave invested for the long term. In that case, liquidity isn't a concern, but security and profitability are. There's also money you'll need to access easily. There, the profitability might not be as high, but you can withdraw it whenever you want. Sometimes you put money in a savings account and can take it out when needed. But just following the laws of wealth isn't enough. Earning, spending, saving, and investing are all very important, so you must care about them. However, that alone is not enough. You must also consider the psychological side of things. There are what I call heavy psychological burdens that can interfere with your ability to generate income. For example, if you visit the city and have a bad experience, you won't want to go back, right? Another important point is parental disapproval. Many people feel like they can't earn more than their parents because that might make their parents feel ashamed. This need not to surpass one's parents, even if unacknowledged, affects around 30% of the global population and acts as a brake on achieving abundance. The fear of parental disapproval can be an obstacle to financial growth. It's essential to work on this psychological aspect before applying the laws of wealth, earning, spending, saving, and investing. Lastly, integrity is highly valued. People often prefer to be poor but honest rather than rich and dishonest. Honesty should guide your financial decisions to ensure a balanced and successful life. You must change your way of thinking about this. The feeling of imminent death is that fear that you're going to die. Life begins with the first breath at birth and ends with the last exhale. That's why, when someone dies, it's said they expired, they stopped breathing. If you breathe while suffering, that becomes a feeling of death that gets imprinted in your mind forever. We should live as if we're going to exist forever. How many people do you know who are 65 years old and could still contribute to humanity, but are programming themselves to die? In reality, the people who live the longest, past 90 or 100, are those who constantly face challenges, think about new things, and set new goals, as if they were going to live forever. This is very important. Now I want to talk about a psychological topic related to karma. I'm not here to argue whether karma exists or not, but some people say they can't make money in this life because of their karma. I want to say that if your past life were more important than this one, you'd still be living that life, not this one. I believe that what matters most, even more than karma, is our freedom. At every moment, you have the right to move forward or backward. This free will is something not even God takes from us, because He Himself gave it to us. Let me mention some common myths. When I say myth, I mean ideas without a clear cause. There's a difference between chance, when something happens randomly, and causality, when there's a reason behind it. People often confuse these two. For example, some people think that in order to earn money, you have to work hard, but that's not true. You have to work smart. Once, a man became a millionaire at the age of 65. When he was interviewed on television, they asked him, "Why did you become a millionaire at 75? Why not at 55 or 45? And he replied that he was so busy working that he didn't have time to make money. That answer is very profound. Sometimes people are so focused on their daily work that they don't stop to see things from a broader perspective. I don't know if this happens to you, but sometimes it's important to take a vacation. Often, when you come back from a trip, you feel refreshed and full of new ideas. There are times when you work hard and still can't make progress. You need to understand that there's a myth that says, "I can't make money and have fun at the same time." People think, "During the week I make money, now on Saturday and Sunday, I do what I want." My friend, what you do for fun, someone else does as their job. I can assure you, even without knowing what your hobby is, that someone out there does what you enjoy as their profession. The best thing you can do is turn that hobby into your job. That way, you'll never feel like you're working. You'll always feel like you're on vacation. The goal is to have a job that makes you happy, even if you weren't paid for it. Then, you learn some money doing what you love. You need to do what you enjoy, and make that your work. No matter how good you are at what you do, there will always be better things. For example, I love creating videos for YouTube, but I have to write a lot of scripts every day. It's not always enjoyable to spend 10 hours writing a single script without knowing if the video will get many views. It's exhausting to do research, fix errors, etc. When I feel frustrated, I remind myself, this is part of my life. I have to make these videos, and this is the price I pay. Then I use some artificial intelligence tools to help with the creative process and make it more fun. So, I have to accept that I won't always be working in my comfort zone. Even when doing what I enjoy, there will be parts I don't like, but I must feel good about what I do, because it fulfills me. The third myth is about being busy. People say, "You know why I don't make money? Because I don't have the same job as my brother." What does your brother do? My brother is a doctor. My friend, let me tell you something I know. There are poor doctors and rich doctors, poor lawyers and rich lawyers, poor accountants and rich accountants, poor artists and rich artists, poor journalists and rich journalists. In every profession, you'll find both wealthy and struggling people, so don't blame your job or anyone else's. You could make sewing needles and become a millionaire. It's not the job itself that matters, it's how you choose to do it. Let me tell you this, the richest people in the world, in general, don't have a college degree. Thomas Edison had only 3 months of formal education, Henry Ford only completed 2nd grade, and Bill Gates, who holds 3 world records and amassed $100 billion, the highest figure in history, did it in just 12 years. He almost became the richest man in the world at 32 and chose to leave college to found Microsoft. So, the idea that not having a college degree is a barrier is unfounded. Often, people who are overly intellectual end up unable to pay their bills at the end of the month. If you have a family member, friend, or neighbor who is extremely smart, chances are their family has to pool money to help them with expenses. I'm not saying don't study, just that studying alone is not enough. You can't make a cake with just flour, butter, or eggs. Those are only ingredients. Learning and acquiring knowledge is just one ingredient, but by itself, it solves nothing. If that were the case, all intellectuals would be millionaires, right? This is a common myth. Another myth people mention is that there isn't enough money for everyone. The financial market is constantly growing. Humanity's current purchasing power is 4 times 10 to the 15th dollars. How do we explain that? In the caveman era, there was practically no wealth, and now, if you look at the global GDP, it's astonishing, and it was all created by the human mind. In Brazil, for example, there are many opportunities. Any foreigner who lives there usually thinks Brazil is full of potential, but Brazilians themselves often don't see it. I believe the country you live in also has many opportunities. People don't depend on geography or terrain, it's about what you hear and what you understand. That's why it's important to understand all of this and to recognize the concept of the money magnet. This concept we've shared with you is the personal tithe. Notice that we've talked about many ideas here. I recommend that you watch this video several times because the more you listen to it, the more it will stay in your mind. We began by talking about prosperity, health, wealth, and family. We also touched on financial success and the awareness of prosperity at different economic levels, survival, commerce, and the cushion of financial independence. We spoke about the wheel of abundance, asking, receiving, declaring, and thinking. We addressed aspects of science, philosophy, and psychology. We introduced the model of the thinker and the demonstrator. The thinker reflects, and the demonstrator tests the thinker's ideas. If you change your thinking, you change your life. We explained the creative process in which you become the co-creator of your life by applying self-assessment, suggestion, and goal setting. We clarified the difference between an objective and a goal. The objective is what you want to achieve, while the goal is the specific set of actions that will lead you there. You fulfill your life's purpose only when you die. If you're still alive, it means you're still working on it. We talked about the laws of wealth, the law of earning, the law of spending, the law of saving, and the law of investing. All wealth is generated by the human mind. You don't walk down the street and have wealth fall on you. If you want to be rich, you have to learn to create value. The value of money is determined by the buyer and the seller in each transaction. What is valuable to one must also be valuable to the other. We discussed the importance of economics. If you know how to save, set aside 10% and act with generosity. We talked about charity and about making money work for you instead of you working for money. We discussed the importance of liquidity, profitability, security, and of course, the legality of your investments. We also explored the psychological aspects of prosperity. Hard work is not the cause of wealth. I'm not telling you not to work, but working alone is not enough. You need to find something you're passionate about and turn your hobby into your profession. More important than what you hear is your ability to act. But before diving into books, you must put what you've learned into practice. Having an education doesn't guarantee you'll make more or less money, and the universe holds abundant potential. To conclude, pay attention to this. If you went to a cemetery and spoke to the people there, they would tell you that life is short and that they didn't have enough time to do what they were meant to do. So, reconsider your life. You were born to grow. Don't let anything or anyone stop you. You've been listening to this video all along. Now, are you going to put it into practice, or are you just going to keep listening? I suggest you watch it at least 7 times to shake your mind awake, and after learning everything we've discussed, put it into action. It's not just about listening. You have to implement it. This knowledge will only have value when it moves from thought to action.